Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so very excited about today's episode and today's guest because this is someone who has so much experience in a very complex world of winning government contracts. And what's even cooler is he's using technology to make it even more streamlined and more accessible for more people to do good work. Let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Arthur Runno. Arthur is the CEO of Turingon, which is an innovative AI-driven software company revolutionizing the government contracting space. With nearly 2 decades of experience in proposal and capture management, Arthur has led successful bids totaling billions, with a B, billions of dollars. He's a Navy veteran and he's a former cryptologic technician or linguist. He combines a strategic mindset with a passion for efficiency and innovation. At Turingon, Arthur is dedicated to creating cutting-edge solutions like Proposal Pilot, which is designed to simplify compliance and empower contractors to win more business in the competitive federal market. Now, what I really love about where Arthur is in the marketplace is that it doesn't get much more competitive than where he is. And so that's why for all of us in hopefully slightly less competitive markets, we're going to get a chance to learn a lot from him here today. So I'm not going to say anything else. I'm excited about this one. Let's dive straight into my interview with Arthur Runno. All right, Arthur, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Heck yes, I'm super excited to hear your backstory from you yourself, because obviously I've read your bios, I've gone through your work, but I want to hear the story of who's Arthur, how the heck did you start doing all these cool things?
Well, basically, I spent 10 and a half years in the Navy, as you indicated, as a linguist, which is part of the intelligence community. Came out of that after 10 and a half years and quickly realized that government contracting is where the money is at. I think I read a statistic once that it's about $1 in $4 in circulation is a federal, state, or local government contract dollar. So tried to start my first venture, a company called National Linguistics, after leaving the Navy to provide linguists to the federal government. That didn't work out so well, but I learned a lot. And joined another startup that did grow very quickly. We took it from 0 to 60 million in revenue in 4 years, providing linguists and doing intelligence work for the federal government. And subsequent to that time, I spent 20 years in the industry, both with my own ventures. I had a successful venture providing medical staff as well as law enforcement support to the federal government, and working in proposal and capture roles for other organizations. So it's been quite a journey. With Turingon, I quickly realized that my profession, which largely I think of myself as a proposal professional, was becoming obsolescent, if not obsolete, with the advent of AI. And I thought how better to be involved than to lead that charge and what shape that takes and how AI is utilized within the federal space to kind of reduce some of the headaches for proposal professionals and help companies win in a more efficient and less expensive manner. And that's how Turingon was born, together with my co-founders who are leading the charge on the technical side.
Yeah, I really appreciate that overview, Arthur. We are for sure going to dive deep into your proposal mind here in today's session. But before we get there, I'd love for you to paint the picture for people who have never navigated the world of government contracts and bidding for contracts on the whole. Paint the picture of what that landscape looks like, because I know it's super complex, but I'm excited for you to simplify it for us.
Sure. Proposals can be daunting, particularly on the surface. The government is by law required to publish proposals. Currently, they put them out on a site called sam.gov. And what you see if you go on there, they buy everything from rifles to tanks to rudimentary things like razors for the troops. So if you sell it, there's probably a chance that the government is trying to buy it. The issue is that when you look at a solicitation, if you're not experienced and not well versed in this field, you're going to see complex clauses in there, something called the Federal Acquisition Regulation that's omnipresent in all solicitations. And they can kind of be hard to navigate. The way I was taught when I started in this business was to print them out and highlight every clause, go over everything, and focus on compliance first, and then try to make the bids compelling. But if you are successful, as I said previously, there's a lot of money to be made with the federal government as a client. And here in the Washington, D.C. metro area where I am, at pretty much every building you pass, you could throw a stone and hit a government contractor. So what we endeavored was to try to make this more efficient for government contractors and in turn for the taxpayer.
Yeah, Arthur, you brought up two big C words, compliant and compelling. Let's go straight into that second one. What makes for a compelling proposal?
Certainly a compelling proposal. There's a variety of things that go into it. I always say that a proposal is a sales finalization document. You could have the best proposal in the world, but ultimately they need to have met someone from your organization first. They need to have shaken their hand, and ideally you need to have helped shape that solicitation, by which I mean the government needs to have a good understanding of what it is that they need. And a good salesperson in any field, not just in government contracting, I believe should really be a consultant to their customer to help them find a solution that fits within their budget and will best serve their needs. When I was active in proposals, I always endeavored to try to give the customer more than what I was taking out, by which I mean a greater value than the dollars that they were spending. So what really makes it compelling is to give them a good understanding that you know what their issue is, how you're solving their problem, and ultimately how you're going to be efficient in delivering it and providing them as few headaches as possible along the way.
Yeah, all important considerations, regardless of what our business is. That's what I've been really excited about our conversation today, Arthur, is obviously you work within the government contracting space, but for all of us, any service-based business that's sending proposals out, these are important principles. You just said the greater value needs to be on that receiving end. Of course, we're not going to pay $20 for $10 in value, but we'd happily pay $20 for $30 in value. And so I really appreciate these principles that are steadfast across all industries. When we talk about AI stepping into this space and assisting us, obviously what you're doing with Turingon is not just quite simply asking ChatGPT, hey, can you write a proposal for this potential job that I'm looking for? Talk to us about the intricacies of what's behind Turingon that's making it possible for people to succeed in this specific and very complex industry.
Interesting they bring up ChatGPT. Of course, it's kind of the big daddy of it all that made all this possible. However, I started playing with ChatGPT and I quickly realized its limitations when it came to government contracting. Namely that particularly when dealing with something called CUI, or controlled unclassified information, there are security safeguards that government contractors have to maintain surrounding that. So they're not able to just upload a document to ChatGPT willy-nilly without worrying about where that winds up. Secondly, of course, anybody who's played with it realizes that there's limitations in terms of the output. You want it to provide 5 pages, it only provides 1. You may not be getting the best information. And of course, there's oftentimes bleed over from other information or incorrect information that's provided. With Turingon, we set out to build a ground up solution, meaning that we designed a custom AI. We are not a ChatGPT wrapper. That was specifically tailored for government contractors. And that's done within what we call a closed container. Effectively, the model is only trained in terms of proposal responses on our customers' data. So each customer is within a closed container with no possibility of false information arising from a different client. And therefore, that provides them the assurance that the output is going to be focused solely on their accomplishments as they seek to espouse their value to the federal government customer. And finally, we are hosted on something called GovCloud through Amazon Web Services, which is an accredited server, thus providing our customers with the assurance that their data is secure and they can upload information freely without fear of it winding up in the wrong hands.
Yeah, super interesting to hear about the tech side of it, Arthur. Although when you and I talk about technology, where my head goes is I also know that you are a wizard when it comes to words. Obviously, as a linguist yourself, one acronym that we throw around a lot in the business world today and in the world in general is LLMs, large language models. And I think that people forget that underneath all of these complex AI models is the language element of it. Talk to us with that linguist hat still on. Talk to us about your perspective on where we are with regard to LLMs, what people's misconceptions might be about it, and really how we can reshape it and get the most out of these.
I mean, ultimately, LLMs are kind of in their infancy. I kind of think that the future may be in smaller language models, actually, customized to each customer set, obviously driving down the cost, which is a significant barrier to entry right now in terms of training the model, cost running into the millions of dollars, as we saw recently with some controversy surrounding ChatGPT as well as DeepSeek coming out of China. But I think as we move forward, this technology is going to become cheaper, certainly less energy intensive as we develop better training technology for these models. And I really think it has the possibility to make us more efficient. And ultimately, I really think that this is going to revolutionize the world, not in just the way we do things, but ultimately in giving us back time through efficiency and hopefully making the world a more stress-free place.
Yeah, I love that view on it, Arthur. Sign me up for a more stress-free place, especially when it's technology that can make our lives easier and better. One thing that you already brought up, and I want to go back to it and go deeper, is you talked about inputs and the importance of one thing that you're doing differently at Turingon is if I upload documents, I know that it's living within my own self-container, whereas I think I'm not saying anything controversial here, but I'm pretty sure ChatGPT has made it clear that it continues to learn from all of us who are using it. Now, there's a difference between free plans and paid plans. People, if you want to go deeper into how ChatGPT is using your data, definitely go look it up because it is in certain ways. But Arthur, that's a key difference in consideration with Turingon is those self-containers that you've already introduced us to. Talk to us about having the flexibility and the ability to have those document uploads and to really control those inputs so that we get better outputs. What do those inputs look like, especially within the realm of writing proposals and submitting them? What are we inputting? What are your clients looking to give to the system for it to be more catered and personalized?
Certainly. Well, I mean, one of the big challenges in government contracting is maintaining kind of a library of both previous proposals and what's called past performance, which is basically just a written record of everything that you've done for previous clients that you may want to reuse and articulate in a future proposal. What our system does, we built a tool, for example, that will integrate seamlessly with SharePoint, if that's what the customer is using. We also have other tools available depending on their level of technology. It can really go in there and allows the ability to select or deselect certain documents to allow them to focus on where the AI is directed in terms of taking information out of it. So, for example, if a customer is targeting a Department of Defense customer, maybe they don't want the past performance reference that's from the Department of Agriculture. That may not be as relevant. However, if they are doing a Department of Agriculture proposal, maybe they want to select stuff from Agriculture and the Department of the Interior. That may be more relevant. So continually updating the model, continually allowing it to learn and to train based on new data and making that as seamless as possible is a challenge within the industry, and hopefully one that we feel we are doing a little bit better than some of our competitors.
Yeah, I love that. Context is king. It's funny. In business, we have so many cliches. Content is king, cash is king, but context is most certainly king when it comes to the AI world. Arthur, I'm totally going to put you on the spot here. It's probably not an exact number that you can give us here on the air, but I'm sure a lot of people, when it comes to proposals in any domain, they realize that rejection is an essential part of the business of writing and submitting proposals. What sort of success rates have you seen within the government contract space, or what are those targets that you look towards and you say, you know what, this is what we want to aspire to, openly acknowledging that you're not going to land every contract?
Traditionally, in what was considered a good proposal shop within this industry, the aim was to win 33% of the bids that you submitted. Now, this number is a little bit deceptive because, as I said before, I think a proposal is a sales finalization document. Oftentimes, the sale is made prior to that proposal, that solicitation ever coming out. much less the proposal going in. And it's the proposal manager's job to validate the promises that were made by the salespeople, or as we call them in the industry, capture people, before going into this, and really make sure that they've given no new objections to purchasing from them, and kind of validating that and closing it. We think with Turingon and Proposal Pilot, we can increase the number of bids. And that may be going after stuff that maybe was not as quite low-hanging fruit as what was traditionally gone after in the industry, but we could kind of lower that cost to bid, which right now runs anywhere from $50,000 to $5 million per proposal, as well as taking off to times 30 to 60 days of several people in an organization's time. And that win rate may actually go down, but we think we can get the number of wins up by allowing them to bid some things that they may not have otherwise gone after, by making the proposal process more seamless and cheaper.
Yeah, I love that. It's a few times already here in our conversation that you brought up that the proposal is one component of the overall sales process and in the lifetime of that deal. Arthur, walk us through what those beginning steps look like, because, and is the proposal, obviously it's not the end of that, because if you land that proposal, then you have to track your outcomes and all of that. Walk us through the lifetime of this deal cycle.
Well, government contracting can be a little bit unusual for an outsider. First of all, competitors frequently work together in what's called teaming. There are certain laws surrounding government contracting. They have what's called set-aside contracts. For example, certain contracts must be set aside for small business. Some must be set aside for service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. So typically, the life cycle begins with an opportunity identification, where a salesperson / capture person identifies an opportunity, decides that it might be a good fit for their organization, and then they may go ahead and develop a team, find additional team members that may want to serve as subcontractors within that effort. They may have a missing component that the prime contractor is missing, where that kind of enhances their bid, after which ideally they will go ahead and meet with the customer, kind of explain their value proposition, try to shape that RFP, so that when the solicitation finally does release, a good portion of the proposal may already be written, because they really understand the customer's hot buttons, what the problem is that they're trying to solve, and they just kind of have to adjust it based on what came out in the final solicitation, go through and submit, and then the hard part is, which is waiting for a notice of award or non-award on something that you think you had a good chance at.
Wow, Arthur, hearing you effortlessly rattle that off makes me feel a little bit silly in asking you this question, because I think it's very evident why you have brought Turing directly into the government contracting space. You're obviously incredibly well versed when it comes to that space, but I do want to extrapolate out of there, and I would imagine that all of your experience in this space makes you really good at proposals on an even more macro level, is that you can look at proposals and identify their flaws, identify their holes, identify the things that they're not directly addressing. What are some of those principles, if we go outside of government contracting, that you think that service-based business owners, that you think that entrepreneurs in any industry of any size can really steal and apply to their own industries?
Sure. I mean, I think ultimately when writing any kind of written sales document, ultimately it is really listening to the customer. Listening and understanding what their requirements are, what their needs are, what their issues are. If you're doing a professional services contract and they've had issues with staffing, well, how are you going to mitigate that? For example, one thing I always like to tell the operations staff is I want 100% recruitment, whether or not we think we need it, whether or not we think we're going to capture incumbents ahead of that proposal submission. Let's go ahead and give them the assurance that this proposal or this contract will be 100% filled on day one of contract award. And that kind of goes for everything. Is there problems supply chain? Is it getting certain elements in a timely manner? And it's really thinking through that problem and kind of making the ultimate proposal or sales document a blueprint for how operations is going to execute on day one of that contract award. They should be able to take that and have a good roadmap for what that's going to look like.
Yeah, Arthur, hearing you say that, it's a piece of advice that comes up so frequently here on this show, and I think any entrepreneurial advice or business book or any educational resources, of course, listening to our customers. And when I hear you talk about these things, I would imagine that in your conversations, which I love the fact that you tell us and emphasize a few times, your proposal starts way before the pen ever hits the paper. You need to talk to the people that you're sending that proposal to. What sort of questions do you ask? How do you really get at the essence of what it is that they're looking for? Because Arthur, I'll transparently share with you, I think about that Henry Ford quote all the time where he says, if I asked my customers what they would have wanted, they would have said a faster horse. How do you get at the crux of what they're really looking for?
I mean, I think really you need to have like an honest conversation, and this needs to be a dialogue and really kind of getting to understand what their issue is. So to use the Henry Ford analogy, what is the issue? Is it trying to get goods to market faster? Is it trying to move between A and B in a quicker manner? And then trying to espouse what it is that you have to offer based on that conversation. I think I said previously, it needs to be a dialogue. And a good salesperson in any field should act as a consultant. And maybe they won't buy this time, but I think sincerity comes through, and people will remember when you did right by them and really advise them without bias, in their endeavor to try to help them be successful. And maybe they're going to come back in a year, 2 years, 5 years, but I think eventually they will come back if you treat every customer in such a manner.
Yeah, really well said. Obviously, Arthur, one thing that I so deeply respect about you and the way that you operate is that you've been clearly playing that long game, and you love playing the long game because you know that these things build up over time, and good things always happen when you put good things into the world and when you do good work. I want to ask you, obviously you've had a very accomplished business career, but you also had a very successful career up to that point. You have been in the Navy. So I want to ask you, what are some of those influences that shape the way that you do business? What are some of those ways that really made you say, hey, when I have my own company, which of course now you've had that you said these are the principles, these are the habits that I want to inject into the way that we operate?
I mean, ultimately, I think the Navy shaped a lot of that, certainly in terms of leadership. The core values of the Navy in terms of honor, commitment, and courage are something that I've carried with me. I had a master chief when I was very junior as an enlisted person early in my career, who told me, Arthur, you're going to have good leaders and you're going to have bad leaders. Learn from both of them and figure out what kind of leader you want to be. And, I did take that to heart, and I learned from them. And I think one of the things that I carried through from the Navy was taking care of your people. Surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, particularly in their specific subject matter area, and then listen to them. A trusted lieutenant does you no good if you shoot them when they bring bad news. There was a thing going around the internet, Pete's evil overlord list. The mistake that every evil overlord makes is shooting the messenger. You never want to be that sort of leader. You want to listen to them. You hired them for a reason. Take it to heart, and ultimately, take their advice. You're paying them for a reason.
Yeah, really well said. I think that it sounds like simplistic advice, but we have to really put it into practice, and it takes a long time for us to actually learn these lessons. Arthur, talk to us more about leadership, because I can't have you on here and not pick your brain in that regard. Obviously, listening to our people, it's clear. Actually, listening has come up several times in our conversation today, not just with regards to leadership. So I want to push you a little bit deeper into those positive examples of leadership. What have those looked like for you, and how has that shaped throughout your career? Because the one thing, I'll put a big disclaimer in here, is when listeners tune into business podcasts, it's easy to think this person is a finished product. And in many ways, Arthur, you've been wildly successful at the things you've done, but talk to us about that evolution of yourself as a leader.
Oh, certainly. I think that when I look back at some of the leaders who have helped shape me and my career, the best ones took an interest in my career, and they helped me out along the way, and they provided me with training, expertise, anecdotes, whatever it was that was needed at a particular moment, that they thought I could benefit from. Under the assumption that a rising tide lifts all ships. I've seen bad leaders that want to stand on someone's shoulder ultimately, and think that makes them taller, and kind of scrunch everyone beneath them down. The good leaders think that by building up everyone underneath them, they will be better by extension, because part of their job is to train their subordinates for the next job, to replace them. And I'd like everyone that works for me to have a good understanding of their next role, to have a good understanding of what it is that every role in the organization is, so that one day, whether it's with us or with someone else, that they can expand their career, we can have a positive impact on them. And ultimately, I think that they reward us with loyalty in the organization as a result.
Yeah, Arthur, speaking of leadership, you're one of us. You're a fellow entrepreneur. I constantly remind listeners of that. You're the CEO of an incredible tech company that is doing really cool things in an important sector. So with that hat on, I always love asking other business owners and CEOs, what's your time horizon look like? When you sit down for your strategic time, for your executive time, what's the time horizon that you're looking at? I know for me personally, I'm a big fan of quarters. I think that quarters are super actionable, but I would imagine that in your space, it's changing every single day. The technology's changing, hardware, software, everything's constantly changing. So where's your head go when you sit down with executive time?
I absolutely think about quarters. I think about it on a day-to-day basis. I sit down at the beginning of the week and look at what needs to be accomplished this week, particularly, within the tech sector. What moves are we making? What moves aren't we making? I think tech startups are a little bit like a shark. If you stop moving forward, you die. So in many senses, there's more risk in doing nothing than in doing something and achieving bad results. But I also believe that you need to build an organization with some sort of exit strategy in mind. What does that look like? Are you building it to sell? Are you building it to go public? Are you building it to just have passive revenue one day and hire somebody else to manage it? So what that looks like, particularly within the changing tech sector, within the changing AI sector, is something that I contemplate a lot, because a lot of the moves we make now will affect our valuation 4 or 5 years from now. And, ultimately what that means for the employees, as well as the stakeholders and investors in the organization, is something that I try to give consideration to in each move that we make.
Yeah, gosh, it's so cool getting inside of your executive mind, Arthur. I so appreciate hearing the way you think about the future. Obviously, with regards to Turingon, you have Proposal Pilot, which we've talked extensively about today. When you look at the Turingon roadmap, are you looking to expand out as far as sectors go, as far as your clients? Are you looking out as far as features? What does that future roadmap look like for Turingon?
Oh, we have several things on the horizon that I think are going to be exciting for the government contract market, bringing out additional features such as teaming pilot to kind of facilitate that process of finding teaming partners for contracts. We are building a pricing tool, which is incredibly challenging, because we are trying to source as much data as possible from historical bids to really understand where pricing should be. So automating that process is quite a difficult challenge from AI, but eventually we are looking to move into other sectors. Principal one that we've had a lot of interest with is universities. We are looking to facilitate the process of writing grants from an artificial intelligence perspective to allow grant seekers, a lot of professors at universities, for example, to really focus on doing that research rather than sitting down and going through the arduous process of, spending hours and hours on paperwork in order to get funded. If that could be automated in an efficient and ethical format, I think that's an area where we could really contribute. And eventually we would like to go into the commercial sector. There's several areas that we've been approached by where commercial companies thought that they could benefit from our product, and we're looking at kind of putting out additional products for that. But I kind of want to take it one thing at a time, focus on Proposal Pilot for the moment, make sure my team stays focused, so that we have the ability and the profitability in order to kind of pursue some of these additional endeavors.
Yes, I love that. Showcasing right here, right now, that executive mind in action. I love hearing about that future roadmap. Big plans, but also strategic and intentional plans, understanding what matters now, and of course, that direction that you're going in. So, Arthur, I so appreciate the way that your mind works and all these insights into the way your mind thinks and the work that you're doing. With that said, I really enjoy asking this question at the end of every interview because it's super broad and I have no idea which direction you're going to take it in, but that is, what's your one best piece of advice. Knowing that we're being listened to by both wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, as a fellow entrepreneur, what's that one thing that you want to impart on them from today's episode?
I'm going to borrow a little bit from Theodore Roosevelt, who once said, "It's not the critic who counts, but rather the man in the arena, who, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. And if he succeeds, knows the triumph of his achievements. So that his place will never be with those poor timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." I've taken that to heart throughout my life. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to get in the arena. You have to try. Go ahead and plan it out. Be strategic about it. Be careful about it. That doesn't mean that you need to be reckless, but you need to be in the arena, or you're always going to wonder what might have been.
Boom. That right there is powerful advice. Arthur, I love the fact that it's advice that you've taken with you throughout your entire career and advice that you continue to lean on. And I'm so grateful for you sharing that with our worldwide audience. I also know, especially after your teaser of all the things that are coming in the future from Turingon, that people will be keen to check out all the great work that you're doing and all the cool things that you're building. Listeners, even if you're not in the government contracting space, I will say you're going to want to check out Arthur's website and everything that his team is doing over at Turingon, because I always say success leaves clues. You're going to see so many cool ingredients of what it is that they're building, the decisions that they're making, the features that they're bringing to their customers in the very intentional and strategic way, not only that you heard Arthur talk here in today's episode, but that you'll see that Turingon is doing. So Arthur, with that teaser in mind, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Well, they can find out more about Turingon at www.turingon.ai.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find that link down below in the show notes. Super easy to remember, though. You'll see Turingon, the company name, spelled out here in the show description, or you can click right on through from the show notes to turingon.ai. We're also linking to Arthur's personal LinkedIn, so if you want to connect with him and maybe there's someone you want to introduce him to, or you want to continue the conversation, then definitely check out the show notes. Otherwise, Arthur, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.